Today I'm going to talk a bit about HTML5 and near future of the web. Because if you've been around for a while and you looked at HTML5, there has been a lot of promises and there's lots of strange stuff going on. So we started with hyping HTML5. A certain company that is fruit related in California basically went up on stage and said, Flash is dead and HTML5 is the best thing ever and you don't need anything else than our browser. Which is good, because it actually made us rethink web development, which was a bit of a rut at that time. But at the same time, I feel disappointed how a lot of companies didn't deliver what they actually said back then. So, for example, on iOS, I can only play one sound at a time when I'm in HTML5. And that's not really killing Flash, I think, because for a game, for example, I need more than one sound file. And HTML5 is, the problem is that everybody wants to have a stake in it at the moment. It's such a hot topic. It's like on every job site, if you got HTML5 in your job description, you probably get lots of offers from companies that have no idea what HTML5 is, but at the same time, they're like, oh, we must be an HTML5 new developer, so that's good. So a lot of people have a stake in it. Web developers want to move sites to interactive applications. I've been a web developer for 15 years. And I realize I'm tired of having to simulate applications, and with HTML5 we can build applications. Native app developers want to reach more users. Like, why should I have to build the same thing for iOS, for Android, for Windows Mobile, and for the web, if the web thing could be converted with great technology like mosync, for example, to other native apps. Designers want to convert their brochureware to more interesting things. Like CSS gives us much more features nowadays than it used to. And it's quite interesting to see how many people are jumping on that bandwagon now and basically building really cool interactive things in HTML5. Game developers want to realize that as well, like Microsoft and Google are now pushing a lot, saying like, yeah, web gaming is going to come and HTML5 is the technology for that. And game companies basically want to port their old titles. They don't want to write new stuff. They just realize like, hey, we got Need for Speed 1 to 16 million for kids and everything, so we want to make more money with that. How about that web conversion stuff? And mobile developers, of course, are thinking about like, oh shit, there's this web developers now taking things away from our market, so we have to learn HTML5. And the problem with that is that all of them have different needs. They have different approaches to the same topic, and all of them are actually bickering against each other which technology is the best. And in essence, you don't need to bicker. It's HTML5. It's open technologies, and it's even the topic HTML5. The term has been so washed out that it includes everything now that is new to new web technologies. So if you say you build HTML5 and you're using CSS, that's not HTML5. There's a different technology already in there, but nobody needs to have these discussions. So conversion strategies are a big thing that companies just want to take their C++ and put it on the web. So mosync are the experts there for you, and they showed you some already. There's also Mozilla mscripten, which is a technology that mosync, I think, uses as well to turn C++ into JavaScript, which is pretty cool because there's lots of cool old technology out there, or even new technology, that doesn't want to be written in JavaScript and can be just converted. And there's these weird comparisons. It always annoys me that every time I come up with HTML5, people come up to me and say like, yeah, but it's never going to be as good as a native app. And you're like, yeah, duh. It's like, it's the same as a Formula 1 car is not as good as a hovercraft, but it's going to be really shit if you try to go over a river. Web development is so much more flexible than bespoke development for a certain native environment that you defined. As web developer, I always played in the unknown. I didn't know what your browser was, what your connection was, what your ability was, where you were in the world right now, if you even understood English. I had no clue, and that was the cool thing about web development. With like native development, you know this is going to be a device that has these capabilities. There's the SDK for you. Most of the time, you don't even need to guess if it works or not. And on the web, you always have to. So native code cannot match the power of HTML5 because you have to build native code for all the different platforms rather than one code base for all of them. And HTML5 is a new environment based on established principles. So web development, progressive enhancement, thinking about the user and testing their connectivity before you give them that 6 million pixel JPEG because everyone has an iPad 3, really, is things that have been around for a while, and we just have to now embrace that a bit. So these web technologies have something for everybody. So all these groups that are listed have something in there that they can play with. And I'm going to talk through some of them right now. I'm not going to do much coding talk here. We can talk about that later. And all of these slides are online. The slides are actually written in HTML5 as well. And all the links are in there, so you can play with that. So there's a lot of GitHub repositories and things like that. So transforming and animating in CSS is absolutely amazing what you can do nowadays. In the past, I could set fonts, I could set colors, I hopefully could do layouts, except for Internet Explorer 6, that always was 5 pixels off there or 3 pixels off there. And nowadays, CSS can get me 3D transformations, can get me animations, and I don't even know, I give it a state at the beginning and a state at the end, and all the transition and all the morphing happens in the CSS engine, hardware accelerated for me. So I don't need to learn all that stuff, and the iPad was the main reason for that. And they needed these fast animations to not drain the battery with a JavaScript animation that was badly written. And you can do really impressive stuff with that. So this is, for example, the CSS book, which is just a little book here that you can fold out, and there's no JavaScript involved here. This is all actually done in CSS and a 3D transformation as well. Or the box is really, really cute. That actually runs nice on an iPad as well. Or the first time I saw it, it actually ran on a playbook. So this is basically 3D transformation and animation using no WebGL or anything. This is just CSS transformations using sprite3d.js, which is a little thing that you can play with. You can click the cows, and I could spend hours doing that, but I won't do now. So CSS gave us the opportunity for designers to actually start animating without having to get a Flash guy in or without having to actually start doing JavaScript animations. Canvas is then the next thing. Canvas is the pocket knife that you have as a HTML developer because it's a low-level painting API. It's just put things on a screen, paint them, connect them to each other, make gradients, fill things out. It's a very simple API that's much easier to use than any of the plotting APIs that you had on the server side, like PHP-GD or ImageMagick before that. It can get video and image data as well and manipulate it. So you can actually convert images with Canvas live in the browser. You can get a video, and I'm going to show that later, and change every single pixel of it. It has a dynamic coordinate system, which is pretty cool as well, because I remember on C64 or on other things, whenever I painted something and then I wanted to scale it, I had to recalculate all the distances by hand. And in Canvas, all I have to change is the coordinate system under it, and it automatically does all the calculations for me. And it's hardware accelerated in Firefox since version 4, which was a year ago, and in Chrome since the last version. They released that now as well. So quickly about music and sound, because I'm very annoyed about this, that it's been like 3 years now that we have CSS and HTML5 and audio support, and it's really not working yet. Because we have all these great native audio events we could listen to when the music starts, when it has been loaded, when it changes, these kind of things. We have all these events, but they're not working properly across all of them. So I wrote an article about this, talking about audio sprites, that actually the idea of CSS sprites is that you put lots of images into one, you just show the bit that you need, and I try to do the same with audio here. So we got the thing breaking, that's pretty cool. So you just basically jump to parts of the audio file that you want to play. And it works fine in Firefox, it works fine in Chrome, it totally breaks in Safari, and it totally breaks on iOS. And it should not, because these are the companies that said HTML5 is the coolest thing ever. So there's a great comparison site called Are We Playing Yet, where you can write audio tests as well and send them in, and then we test them across browsers. There's some great talks on why HTML audio is a failure at the moment. And there's a great fallback called Sound Manager 2, which is a JavaScript library that uses the dirty hack of using Flash when it's not available in the native audio APIs and fixes a lot of these problems in them as well. So if you use audio, that's always a good option. And a lot of games actually use that. You can take audio further then as well. Mozilla Audio Data API came out, I think, about 1.5 years ago, and it gives you a bit access to the music. So you can calculate the beats per minute, you can find out what is playing at the moment, you can actually generate music as well. And then there's a web audio specification, which is by WebKit, and there is a syncing effort and several libraries that actually work together that you can actually do things like that. We had a hack day in New York, and within 2 hours people built that thing. So they basically use Canvas to read out the beats and actually show you the different parts of the thing. You can turn around with the mouse. And of course, as these are young kids, there's going to be some beat dropping going on later on. So. But using Canvas, that was really simple to do, and the GitHub repository is there, you can play with that. This is a game that I've written that shows you just simply what is part of HTML5 and what isn't, so you have to catch the things that are part of HTML5, and when you catch the things that are not part of HTML5, you get numbers taken from you. So it has mouse support, it has keyboard support, but as it's now running here in Firefox on desktop and on mobile phone, we also have accelerometer support, which not every browser gives you in HTML5 yet, which is rather annoying. So I can easily switch that thing over to my Android phone and play it from there and play with the orientation instead, much I would do with like Google Jump. And it's really hard to record yourself when you're doing that. That's why it's really rubbish here. But it shows that you can reuse the same technology across all these platforms. And it's what I mostly wanted to show with that is that, first of all, you can base it on HTML. So if you want to redesign that now for a company, or you want to make a different game out of it, instead of having to rewrite the game, all you have to do is change the data in the HTML itself. So I have a data collision here that says energy 20 and the data type is good. So that means if that collides with your play paddle, then actually you get extra points. If the bad type connects with you, it gets minus 20 energy. So you can fix the game and change the game just by writing a new HTML page. And that's nice to play with people who are just HTML web designers, these kind of people. And HTML should not be a dumping ground for random divs and spans, but actually should have logic in it, and that's what I'm doing with it here. And I'm getting in all the different events that you have. You have a key down, a key up, touch start, touch end, click, mouse move, device orientation. So there's so many things you can interact nowadays with your websites or web products. We should actually cover all of them, rather than like, oh, you need a mouse to do that, or you need a keyboard to do that, or, well, you need an iPad 3 with a fast connection. Sorry, you're poor. And think performance is a big thing as well. Like, these batteries drain really fast. Just try to play the newest Angry Birds in space. It's basically heating your pocket mostly. And it's not nice to do. It's not. I don't want to kill my battery just to try a website out. So there's a page visibility API by Chrome or by WebKit team, which is W3C specification as well, which is pretty interesting because it realizes if the user is looking at the page right now. So if the page is in another tab, for example, it stops all the execution of the JavaScript in that tab or in your loop, in your game loop, because there's no point in using up cycles when nobody's looking at them. And request animation frame, which is a Mozilla thing that then later on got taken on by Chrome and also now in Internet Explorer, does the same thing. We always try to hack in web development or game development on the web by just doing a timeout with 10 milliseconds. So like every 10 milliseconds, do something and move something on the screen and do awesome stuff. Now the problem is that most monitors run on 60 hertz, which means they do it 6 times. We try to do something 6 times while the monitor is still showing the same screen. So we're actually wasting energy here and we're wasting our calculation cycles, and that's why games get out of sync all the time. So with request animation frame, I can actually ask the hardware, is a new 60 hertz cycle coming? And if it is, then it actually executes my loop, which makes much more sense than trying to simulate that and then getting out of sync. Nowadays, not a problem anymore. I remember on C64 times, we had 50 hertz in Europe and 60 hertz in America. So when you got original games from America and you played them, then they were flickering a bit. So you had to rewrite a lot of these loops to actually make them work. And request animation frame does that in the browser for you. It's so much easier nowadays. So what's going on here? Cool. So GetUserMedia is the next new thing that is not quite there yet, but you have a flag in Chrome where you can turn it on, and there's a polyfill as well. And what that one allows you to do is get actually access from the camera into your website. So you have a GetUserMedia audio and video. You have a function, and then you get the video element in the page, and just set the source to it. And you can do really cool stuff in the browser with that. So this demo here, for example, now in Firefox uses Flash because we haven't enabled it yet. But you can take a picture of yourself in the browser now and then do face detection in JavaScript, for example. And in Chrome, you can do the same thing by turning on a flag and running that as well. So this is dangerous stuff. End users will not do that at the moment, but it's a good thing to test it out for yourself. And then you get the same thing there. You load the page, you have the camera access automatically, and then you can start taking a picture and it does the face detection. Funny enough, it was a bit slower than Firefox in this case. I don't know what happened there yesterday night. Normally it should be the same speed. But what a few people have done with that is actually run it through WebGL then. So, and then you can do all these like effects that you can do in Photo Booth, and that turns anybody looking at your computer into a 5-year-old who's like, bleh, and do these kind of things. But this is live now, and you can play with that in the browser, and you can see that things like Instagram, that get $1 billion from some other companies, could be done in web technologies as well, if people cared. So there's a polyfill for that, there's an introduction at Creative.js, instant camera, effects camera, you can try them out yourself. So the next thing that people are going on about, and I have nice gaming speakers here, we do a lot of gaming events at the moment, is that people want to write games in HTML5, and that's good because it's actually great to have a web-enabled game rather than having to, oh, here's an update for Angry Birds, please download those 23 megs over your connectivity that's like £7.50 per megabyte because you're in Sweden right now. On the web you can update these things much, much faster. And let's face it, games have come into a really strange world. I found this one yesterday, and I really don't know. It's, you know, that this Star Wars dancing game is bad enough, but Sauron in the background doing these moves just doesn't work for me at all. It's just, and you know, the reason is simple. The reason is that kids actually are the ones that you make most money with. Like most of the games right now are actually sold to spoiled darling little children that like to spend money on iPhones. And so we should be thinking about this market much more. So what we did with that is we came up with BROWSERQUEST. And BROWSERQUEST is a game that actually works with thousands and thousands of users using WebSockets, where you can play against each other in this like a 8-bit world. And that was the best feedback that we got. Like HTML5 is not quite far yet. I mean, look at what that stuff looks like. You're like, you know, we made it look that way. It's not supposed to be just that way. What was funny about BROWSERQUEST is that we threw it out there and we just wanted to test it. We wanted to say, can it scale up to 100 users? And then Slashdot found it, and TechCrunch talked about it, and we internally we had 3,000 users, 3,000 concurrent users over WebSockets playing an HTML5 game. And then a few people had to get up at night and actually put a few more servers in, and we managed to scale it up to 6,000, 7,000 people without even planning to release that thing in a big way. But you see that the market is there, that people are really excited about that and want to do something like that. And it's good. I don't want to have to use Flash to play a simple game like that. So something is happening with my computer here, which is not good, but cool. As you can see, this HTML stuff is really awesome. Let's try that again. Wow. Okay, maybe try Chrome. There you go. So the next wishes of game makers were a few things that we didn't have in HTML5 yet. It was a full screen API. Everybody wants to go full screen. Problem with full screen on the web is like, as browsers are written in HTML and JavaScript, I could simulate the interface of a browser and make you type in your credit card details. So what you need to do in there is with the full screen API was a lot of like security things, like we have to tell people that something is happening, and that is working at the moment. So if you try the demo out that we have, that's the definition. If you try the demo out that we have, you can turn any HTML element now into a full screen element, and it tells the end user, hey, you're in full screen mode right now. So you can define different styles, but you also the user will know that they are in full screen mode rather than just in a simulated mode out there. I don't know what my machine is doing, but it hasn't been rebooted in months, so. Cool. Other things, WebSockets allows you peer-to-peer connections from users or long polling connections from you to your users rather than having to do every 300 milliseconds, are you there, are you there, are you there? No, they're just there and it's all good. And OpenGL is WebGL, but not quite. There's a few things in there that are not quite the same, but you can do a lot of WebGL stuff in the web now, and it's really amazing. The pointer-lock API was something we never thought of, but I'm going to show you in a second what it is. And then there's a game controller support. So the MOUSELOCK API or pointer-lock API is that problem. If you're in a 3D world in a game and you're in a browser, you still have your cursor. And when you move the cursor to the screen, you get stuck in that. So we had to find a way to actually override the normal behavior of the browser that you move your mouse around and lock it to the center of the screen, that when you move your mouse now, you just pan the camera around rather than have a pointer in there. So that was not a hard thing to do, but it was a very important thing to do because now you can play 3D games without actually going to the right-hand side and ending up on your monitor, for example, which happens when people play in the office, which you shouldn't because you should be working. The GamePad API is interesting as well because that allows you to connect gamepads to a browser. So that works in Chrome with a flag as well, and in a certain build of Firefox that I have with me. And I'm not going to do that live now because this thing's crashing already. But I can actually control these slides with that joystick now. Not that this joystick was ever meant to be, but I had one at home and I sent it to the guys that wrote the drivers for it and said, like, I want this supported because everybody can have these Xbox game controllers. But this is cool. This is much better. And it's amazing how fast, out of a sudden, when you use a game controller in a simple game like this Rockets here, how it becomes much more of a gaming experience than just using your keyboard. Because it's just, the immersion of that is much, much better. And I see that with people that are scared of computers as well. My parents wouldn't touch computers at all, but they actually would play Wii because it's natural, you know, it makes sense. So the last thing I'm going to cover a bit is mobile. And mobile was always a pain for web developers because we did not get access to stuff. We're just like, aha, you have to write Java, you have to write C#, you have to write C++, otherwise you don't get the accelerometer, you don't get the access to the camera, you don't get access to the vibration alarm and these kind of things. So we took that on and said, okay, let's define standards and write the specifications and write the software that actually allows you to access these things in JavaScript. And we have them now. We have a battery status API, we have a camera access API, we have an IndexedDB database for storing data on a phone. We have a vibration API, which we renamed from vibrator because of the stupid jokes that always came around it. You can send SMS, and you can do telephone, you can do calls now from JavaScript on a mobile phone. And these are all have been defined. These, we're working with other companies like Google and Microsoft as well to send them out. And what we did with that is do GECKO. And GECKO was these, we said, okay, there's no chance that Android and iOS will ever listen to us and allow us to do all that stuff from a browser that's not their browser. So on iOS, I can't even install Firefox. So we said, okay, how about we move the whole thing over? And we have that now. So if I go to a camera now, for example, and I do photo booth to show you a camera, so I can access here. This is a GECKO phone. So you can see it's basically a phone that has a little interface. And when I open this now, and I can show you all the apps that are going on. This one has the same Android type kind of touchy-feely thing. It works fast, it works out fine, it runs HTML5, it runs WebGL, and it actually runs games as well, like Internet Explorer. The Internet Explorer team wrote Cut the Rope, or converted Cut the Rope together with the guys from that originally wrote Cut the Rope, and just put it on the web. And we thought, hey, if we want to show off our hardware, want to show off our software, how about we just use their website? So if you scroll that thing up a bit, then you can still see the Internet Explorer logo down there. But you don't need to scroll, then you don't realize that actually somebody else has done that job for us. But the really awesome thing about this one is that the interface here is not Android. The interface here is not Windows. But if you just look at it, the whole interface of the phone itself is totally unreadable. It's pretty awesome. The whole interface is HTML. So I can write it's a Linux core with Firefox on top, and everything that is in this phone is JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. And the cool thing about that is now that together with providers like Telefonica in Spain and South America, they said they can release a phone for about 70 to 90 euros because they don't have to pay any licenses to anybody, because this is all open source. It can download to GECKO, you can flash it on a Samsung Galaxy S2 or a Galaxy Nexus S at the moment. And we're working on making that much, much easier, because now you need a Linux machine or Linux VM to do that. But it's terribly exciting for me as a web developer to have hardware that runs on web technology and not having to go through some technology conversion thing and pay evil companies like, let's not go there. So the last thing is WebRTC, and WebRTC is a really futuristic thing, but it's already working and we're already working on it. And that is basically messaging in the browser. So Google Hangouts, Skype, these kind of stuff. So peer-to-peer connections between people over video and audio. And as it is in JavaScript and is an open technology, I can actually realize when you're on a slow connection, I'm on a fast connection, and you can fix it until you get the best quality for both, and you don't have the VoIP problems you have in Skype with the ding, 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 and somebody not being understandable. So WebRTC is the new standard of allowing for communication in the browser. So the web is a beautiful thing, and all these technologies are there for us to play with, and we spend 90% of our time bitching at each other that native is better than the web and the web is better than native, rather than like, you know what, you're a C++ guy, here's mscript and here's mosync, turn it over and make some cool JavaScript stuff, and then I can put some CSS on it, or we can make it perform because I know performance on the web and you don't. You can wonderfully work together. This is an ad from Lego in 1981 where they actually showed that whatever it is that you build, it can be beautiful because you put your effort in. And that's what I think web development and also app development should be about, not about making the next game that sells millions of them and then like 2 months later nobody knows about anymore. And it has a redhead kid, so that's always good for ads. So yeah, that's all I have, so time to play. The slides are online. If your computer doesn't die like mine, it's totally fine. And yeah, you can get all this stuff on the web. I'll be here until lunch and a bit later, and then I have to go, but grab me and have a few talks about HTML5, and thanks very much.